What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto and Fem Sasuke were forced into ANBU's darkest mission together? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. While walking through already dark streets of Tokyo, 23 years old Naruto Uzumaki counted that today, it was exactly 5 years from when he'd moved into the city, surprised everyone and left his old life as well as his tiny hometown, Konoha, behind. That day, he'd been relieved beyond any belief to get to start a new life, away from everything. Now, however, with rain beating his face and a long, frustrating day of work in a coffee shop behind, no amount of reasoning kept him from wishing he could have gone back to the start, at least for a little while. His depressed thoughts were cut sharply when something he would have never expected facing practically ran into him. From behind a corner, a man with black eyes and equally dark hair that had a pot haircut wobbled into view, clutching one hand tightly to a badly bleeding chest wound and gasping. In some other situation, the expression that appeared to his face could have been described as comical. His eyes widened and bulged until they almost popped out, and all color disappeared from his skin. He couldn't bring himself to speak or move until the stranger was only 2 steps away. "Hey, geez. What happened? Are you?" He didn't bother to finish. It was quite obvious that the Raven was not okay. His heart hammered while the man's full weight landed against him, leaning for support, and he could already feel warm blood that stained his clothes. Dark eyes were filled with several emotions from pain to terror when finding his "Run, you idiot," the other rasped. There was a clonk when something the man had been holding fell to ground. He couldn't even breathe before a chilling, ear-splittingly loud bang echoed through the alleyway. For a second or so everything was perfectly still, then, as though in a slowed motion, the unfamiliar man slid to the ground, dead. Pool of blood-stained pavement rain had made black, coming from a gunshot wound that had just appeared to the Raven's head. It was obvious that nothing could be done for the man anymore. While he stared at the corpse with wide, disbelieving eyes and shuddered like a leaf, he wished from the bottom of his heart that he would have managed to scream or move, anything. But something was blocking his airways, and his limbs were much heavier than concrete. It was then his eyes spotted something that, despite the horrendous situation, nailed his attention. There, lay on the ground, was what looked like a CD or a disc of some sort. The crackling, panicked male voice that came next startled him so badly that he jumped backwards. "Lee? Lee, answer me, damn it. Are you in there?" Rain and still flooding terror almost managed to block his ears from the sounds of splashes as steps approached. Very slowly, unwillingly, lifting his gaze, he found a gray-haired young man with glasses approaching. His already huge eyes widened even further when a silvery weapon was lifted against him. "Sorry about this." For some reason his gaze locked to a snake tattoo on the other's wrist that shone like dried blood in pale moonlight. "This is nothing personal." With thoughts and memories flashing by in a flood, he prepared himself for the final seal. But for once in his life he had luck. There was another bang, much sharper than the one he'd heard before, and the gray-haired man threatening him spun around with a breathtaking speed, firing some fast shots towards a nearby roof. And it was then he saw his opportunity arriving. Having barely any control over his actions, he snatched the disc he'd seen on the ground, then ran, not really knowing where he was going. He didn't even care about the destination, so long as it was away from the shooting. As soon as he was at a distance he considered safe, he threw up loudly, some tears spilling to his at the moment snow-white cheeks. He was trembling so badly that the disc barely remained in his hold. What the hell had he just seen? By the time Naruto finally made it home, after taking all possible detours and ending up lost for 5 times because of shock, it was already midnight. He wasn't surprised to find his roommate and best friend Kiba Inuzuka awake, flipping through channels quite dully. Well, look who finally shows up. "Did you find the—" Black eyes then turned towards him, and widened dramatically when spotting his pale features and all the already dried blood staining his clothes. "Holy shit. What did you do this time?" In any other situation he might have been annoyed, but now he only kept shivering and feeling like throwing up. He swallowed hard. "You'll never believe this." Kiba's eyebrow bounced high up. "Try me." 3 days after those events, Naruto was getting a splitting headache while sitting in the office of a highly noted prosecutor, Jiraiya. We've been through this for 1,000 times already, he whined, running a hand through his hair with great exasperation. How many more times do I have to retell the events of that night? It isn't exactly the highlight of my life. The man gave him a look of understanding. I know, kid. But it sounds like you're dealing with a man we've been chasing and trying to nail for the past 10 years already. We want to make sure we've got all the facts right so we'll get this over with. He was by no means a genius, but he'd been lied to enough during his lifetime to know that he wasn't told everything. This is a huge case, right? Jiraiya hesitated before nodding slowly. Yeah. Did the room's temperature just drop? Because he was shivering. I'm the only living witness, aren't I? No, but you're definitely the best we've got so far. You may be exactly what we've been praying for. Something warm bubbled in his stomach. He swallowed, although it was a difficult task. You'll protect me from those creeps, won't you? For several nights he'd gotten barely any sleep, afraid that the gray-haired freak would somehow make it into his room and… Jiraiya's expression became so solemn that it scared him. I'm sorry, kid, but… we can't guarantee protection good enough for you. But I know people who can. The man pulled out a small card that had few words imprinted to it. There's an organization called ANBU. RUG is specialized in highly classified missions, black ops and witness protection. During 20 active years they've only lost 2 or 3 clients. The man dared to grin a bit. If there's anyone who can protect you, it's they. He also grinned, his chest feeling much lighter now. Then what are we waiting for? Give me a phone. After all, things couldn't get any worse from here, right? Sasuke Uchiha's hands were perfectly even when she lifted her weapon, then fired 4 carefully darted shots, each of them roaring the exact same second thunder did outside. Sasuke. Her eyes narrowed while she fired a 5th shot, coming to a conclusion that the voice belonged to one of the ghosts in the back of her head. Sasuke. 6th shot, which almost shattered the board to which she was aiming. Sasuke. Finally convinced that this voice was in fact a real one, she put away her gun and removed earplugs while turning around to face her boss, Kakashi Hitaki. What? Her tone certainly wasn't such that would have been smart to be used when talking to a superior. But she'd known Kakashi far too long to care, especially after some sleepless nights. The man's face didn't waver. We just got a new client. There was a beat's pause. Jiraiya requested you. She arched an eyebrow. Oh. She knew exactly what kind of a mission there'd be to come if she was the one asked to take care of it. Things would get messy. Look, the last mission was rough, to say the very least, and officially you're still recovering. Kakashi's eyes held sympathy she wouldn't have expected to find from them. I understand if you… She didn't want to listen to that. Spare both our time and tell me about the mission. There was still some reluctance upon her boss's face. It's Orochimaru related. Apparently Kabuto had a mission. The man held a pause, contemplating. Sasuke. Lee's dead. Only pride kept her eyes from widening. What? She took a moment to compose herself. Why the hell didn't anyone tell me? You only just came back to work today. I asked everyone not to bother you with it just yet. The man sighed, running a hand through silvery hair. I gave Sakura a month off, but I doubt she'll stay away that long. Blood boiled in her veins, just like pretty much every time Orochimaru was brought up. This had gone too far? Do we have any witnesses? Actually, yes. And that's your mission. Kakashi's face held the same hard look as always when the man gave an assignment. Apparently a young man named Naruto Uzumaki saw pretty much the entire thing. He stayed there so long that he eventually caught a good look of Kabuto. He's willing to testify. She grit her teeth so tightly that even Kakashi must have heard the screech. So there's finally hope. Where can I find that idiot? Neither of the two could have ever imagined what kind of a wheel spun into motion that day. Naruto had lost track on how many times he'd circled around he and Kiba's shared apartment that morning, biting his nails so hard that there was pretty much nothing left of them anymore. Eventually Kiba, who was also home trying to enjoy spending a lazy Saturday, had enough. He emitted a tiny cry of startle when a slice of an apple was thrown at him. He cast a somewhat insulted look towards his roommate. Hey, what the heck was that for? Kiba's expression remained sour. For you driving me insane. Do you have any idea of how long you've been bouncing all over the place? The brunette pointed towards a door with a tiny knife he'd been using on an apple. Akamaru hasn't dared to leave my room for hours. He grinned sheepishly. Sorry. It's just that a lot's happened lately. Seeing some guy get butchered, almost getting killed and having to fear for my life. Such nice things, he listed mentally. Just then they both jolted and Akamaru left Kiba's room with loud barks when there was a firm knock on the apartment's door. Once they'd exchanged a look, he walked up to open. From the very beginning he'd had a picture of his bodyguard in his mind, a harsh-looking, scarred man in his mid-30s who smoked non-stop was what he'd been imagining. What he found when opening up the door certainly wasn't what he'd expected. For stood before him was a woman he found very attractive at his age with flaming onyx eyes and long, also black hair on a ponytail. One eyebrow rose at him. Uzumaki Naruto? He nodded very slowly and gulped, his throat feeling very dry all of a sudden. I'm Uchiha Sasuke. I'll be your bodyguard until Orochimaru's trial will be over in about 6 months. After a stilled moment, irritation appeared to her face. Are you going to let me in? He grinned sheepishly while stepping to side, allowing the raven to enter. Hey, sorry. I was just… Honestly, he had absolutely no idea. Was Sasuke's response while the woman's eyes scanned through the apartment. Before he could come up with how to proceed, Kiba saved him. The brunette smiled brightly while holding out a hand for Sasuke. A predatory look in his eyes Naruto knew far too well. Hey there. I'm Kiba, Naruto's roommate. Sasuke's eyebrow rose. She didn't take the offered hand, instead folded her arms. Kakashi never mentioned a roommate. Naruto waved a hand. Nah, Kiba's harmless. He patted Akamaru, which had also appeared to greet the arrival, and so is this little thing. Sasuke didn't seem all that excited. Well, if we're finally done with the introductions, let's talk about rules. Naruto fought hard to hold back a groan. Kakashi had never liked the meetings the leaders of ANBU had twice a month. Not only did they require a lot of paperwork and headache, but they also meant that he had to sit in the same table with Danzo, the leader of Root. But fair enough, the meetings also had their tiny highlights. One major one of such was watching Gekko Hayate, his executive officer, and Azuki Yugo, Danzu's greatest spy, dancing around each other. You still haven't asked her out, have you? Hayate started to cough violently, due to one of his usual fits or the coffee the man had been trying to gulp down, one can only guess. The man cast a somewhat moody look towards him. There was one more cough. Not that easy for us all, okay? It took a lot of him not to smirk, sure it is. He nodded towards Yugo, who was currently flipping through a file. You're a grown man. Ask her out during the next 6 months. As an afterthought he added, and that's an order. Because if you don't, I will. The man shook his head, seeming mildly amused. You. There was yet another set of coughs. Or a cruel man. The man then noticed something behind him and all but winced. I just remembered that I've got paperwork to do. With that the man started to speed off, coughing all the way. Kakashi. It took a lot of him not to scowl when Danzu's very unwanted voice drifted into his ears. I heard you managed to find a witness. He nodded stiffly while turning around, not bothering to try and hide his revulsion. That's right. He didn't quite understand the meaning of this interrogation. Danzo knew he didn't talk about missions with this high classification. The older man's eyes moved towards the huge room spreading below them, where several of his employees were taking care of their daily duties. I see Sasuke isn't around. Hard eyes strayed towards him. Are you sure she's stable enough for something like this after what happened? He grit teeth, feeling fully ready to kill. She's my best agent, Danzo. And I know my employees well enough to be able to tell when the time's right to go back to field. His eyes then spotted 2 people he hadn't expected to see yet down below. ANBU's newest recruit to replace Lee, a man named Sai, and Sakura. Now, if you're done with chit-chatting, we've got some real job to do. A loud growl crawled through Danzu's throat when the man turned sharply, starting to all but stomp away. This isn't finished, Hitaki. I know, he mused sourly. But at least there was now a small break. Sighing inwardly, he started to follow the older. In the meantime Naruto felt like he'd been back in junior high all over again. Sasuke's eyes were dangerous when looking into his. First of all, no stupidities. I won't accept clients whose life expectancy can be counted in days. He nodded slowly, sure. He could only wonder what the woman meant with stupidities. Good, I'm glad we understand each other. Dark eyes seemed to gain a touch of fire. Rule number 2. For as long as you're under my guard, you won't be going anywhere alone. That much should be clear. Number 3. She threw a tiny device at him. That's a transmitter. If we're ever apart for some reason and you get into a trouble, push the button and I'll be there. Was that curiosity he spotted in Kiba's eyes when the brunette took a look at the device? Now that's neat. Seeing the man's expression, Sasuke gave a glare and went on. Rule number 4. No relationships with either one of you. This is purely duty, nothing more. Naruto shrugged. Sounds good to me. He then spotted a nearly scarred wound on the back of the Uchiha's hand. It looked like something had been slammed right through skin and flesh. He couldn't contain his curiosity. Where's that from? Does it hurt? Sasuke all but glared at him. I almost forgot to add rule number 5, she stated in a stiff tone. No personal questions. Your life story is none of my business, and mine is sure as hell none of yours. Are we clear? He gave the woman a very dry look. We won't be doing a lot of socializing, right? Dark eyes flashed his way, carrying deep irritation. Do you want someone who keeps you alive, or a new playmate? Because you won't be getting both. He responded with sticking out his tongue, although he had no idea of where such a gesture came from. Sasuke rolled her eyes skywards. So I'm going to be a babysitter. Very nice. They all then tensed up a bit when the woman's cell phone started to buzz in her pocket. She cast a meaningful glance towards him. I'll be back in a minute, so stay put. Once they could be sure she was out of earshot, Kiba gave a small whistle. Whoa. Now that's a firecracker. He scoffed, looking at his friend with disbelief. You've gotta be kidding me. The brunette shrugged. So she's a piece of work. But you've gotta admit that at least she's very pleasant to look at. He snorted, glancing towards the direction to which Sasuke had disappeared. I just wish she'd have a mute button on her. Kiba wasn't able to hold back a laughter although they heard the woman hang up in another room. The raven arched an eyebrow at them once returning, but didn't ask a thing. It was Jiraiya, she announced instead. Time to move. If one would have asked Haruno Sakura's friends to describe her personality, they would have all given at least one word: stubborn. She'd been headstrong since the day she was born a month too soon, and in her job that personality trait had kept her alive through many missions. That's why she found herself back in the huge base building of ANBU much earlier than she'd been supposed to return, although it hurt nearly more than she could bear to face all the memories. She glanced towards a reception desk, gaze locking to the flowers placed on it. When entering ANBU's base for the very first time, the thing her eyes caught were flowers placed into an extremely beautiful vase on reception desk. Unable to resist the temptation, she touched them. You're new, aren't you? She jumped a bit at the male voice, then turned around to meet who she soon knew to be Lee. She blinked twice. Yeah. She felt like wincing. Is it that obvious? He shook his head, grinning. No. It's just that no one else around here shows enough youth to pay attention to things like that. She felt like blushing, although she didn't know why. Thanks, I guess. After a beat's hesitation, she offered a hand towards him. I'm Sakura. The young man's smile became unnaturally bright. My name is Lee. It's very nice to meet you. As from then all the way until he died, she got one flower from him every day. Just then, without any warning, she bumped into something warm and soft. In a couple of seconds she gasped loudly when feeling burning somewhere around her chest area and stomach. Are you alright? The male voice was smooth, pleasant, but seemed to lack something. Lifting her gaze, she found a quite attractive man with nearly white skin, black eyes and dark, short-cut hair. He offered her a napkin. You really should look where you're going. Feeling a slash of irritation, she snatched the napkin and started to fix the damage as well as possible. So should you. He shrugged nonchalantly. I'm not the one who walked around like a zombie and got coffee all over me. Her left eyebrow twitched. You seriously don't know when to shut up, do you? Sigh, I didn't expect you to arrive yet. Turning their heads they found Danzo, beside whom walked Kakashi. Sakura felt like gulping thickly when seeing the look Kakashi darted towards her. I didn't expect to see you, either. Something changed in the man's eyes. But, now that you're here, I've got a task for you. Danzo didn't let the man finish before speaking to Sai. We've caught traces of an organization called the Akatsuki. I want you to start investigations. The younger man nodded. All right. Kakashi picked up from there. This is a joint operation of Root and Black Ops. Sakura, you'll be helping Sai gather information. Sakura felt her eyes widen. What? She then growled. I won't be doing paperwork for this. Sakura. Kakashi's gaze was hard, yet hid something that looked like sympathy. I understand you don't like this, but right now this is where you're needed the most. The man then spoke so quietly that only she could hear. I'm pretty sure Lee would like to see you do this instead of running around aimlessly and unprepared. The mention of Lee's name did the trick. Her shoulders slumped while she accepted her fate. Fine. If it'd require working with an idiot like Sai to avenge Lee's death, she'd do it. Kakashi all but grinned. Good. Now get to work. There's a lot you'll have to do. During the past days, Naruto had been in Jiraiya's office for so many times that he knew the room and the whole building almost perfectly. The man greeted him with a nod and smile, then cast a somewhat curious look towards Sasuke. I see you finally got your bodyguard. He scoffed inwardly, yeah. He then chased his thoughts elsewhere. So, what's up? Sasuke was pretty secretive about this meeting. The look in Jiraiya's eyes chilled him a bit. We found something interesting. The man pulled out a couple of pictures. Does that symbol seem familiar to you? Looking at the pictures, he found cold shivers running down his spine. They were of two corpses, or more like necks of such. Soon enough, however, his eyes locked to what they should have. Both necks carried a strange, black spiral-like symbol, a tattoo, he figured. He frowned. No, Then pieces of memories clicked. That disc he'd found, hadn't it had such a picture on its cover? He gasped faintly. Wait, yes. I've seen this before. Jiraiya's eyes lit up with hope. Can it be connected with the murder you saw? He nodded. Yeah, I suppose. He frowned again. What's this about? Jiraiya took the pictures from him. There was a somewhat strange look in the man's eyes. I'll tell you when I know more. The older then grinned. Now get going. I know it isn't exactly entertaining for you to be here. I'll call one of you if anything new comes up. He was more than happy to obligate. As soon as they stepped to a street outside the courthouse, Naruto rubbed his hands together with excitement. Now, I'm starving. Let's go and get some ramen. Sasuke snorted. It's only 11. You can't seriously be thinking of junk food already. Besides, it's the safest to take you directly back home. He scoffed. You're paid for being my bodyguard, not my lifestyle coach, right? So shut it. Sasuke snorted, sounding like she'd muttered, pain in the ass. It was at that moment he decided he'd had enough. You know what? I don't even need you. Throwing Sasuke's rules into a dumpster, he stepped out of the shadows they'd chosen and spread his arms wide, making sure that he could be seen from everywhere. See? Nothing, so feel free to leave me alone. Sasuke growled, sounding dangerously close to a deranged animal. Step away, now. It wasn't until then he noticed that there was a rather dangerous-looking red spot dancing nearby his chest and felt his eyes widen. He never got the chance to move before Sasuke worked for him. He gasped when an astonishing amount of force threw him against a wall and trapped him there. Gunshots that sounded like explosions to him echoed for a tireless age until whoever had been attacking ran out of bullets, and it became so silent that his ears hurt. He gulped thickly when a .45 was aimed directly at his skull. Do that ever again, Sasuke hissed through her teeth, and I'll shoot you myself. He stared at her for a moment, then snorted. You wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't, Sasuke stated calmly, putting the gun away. I'd strangle you in your sleep. He glared at the woman's back while she went. Not if I get to you first. He got a firm right hook as a reward for his witty comment. Hey, he whined, pressing a hand to his now sore eye. You're not supposed to hit clients. Sasuke snorted. My job is to keep you alive, not unharmed. He scoffed. Wise ass. The woman's eyes flashed towards him. You've still got one healthy eye, you know? She surveyed first his physical condition, then the nearby rooftops. Now let's get going. We've obviously got a lot of talking to do when it comes to your safety. He swallowed whatever there'd been on his mind and remained in a sulking silence. This'll be long 6 months, he mused darkly. Already quite far, a young woman with a bizarre haircut and dark, glass-covered eyes pulled out her cell phone. It's Karen. Eyes flashed when lights of a car passing by hit them. I spotted our target. And there's also something interesting you should know. Elsewhere, Kabuto's eyebrow rose when a woman with long, brown hair on a ponytail entered a huge office. Nozeki 1010 signs up for duty, she informed, her steely, formal voice sending shivers of pleasure through him. 1. Sitting in a huge chair nearby, Orochimaru greeted the arrival with a nod, a dangerous look in his eyes. Welcome, then. I assume Kabuto already explained our rules and gave your job description yesterday? Ten nodded this time, her expression unwavering. That's right. Traitors, interferences and delays aren't allowed. Very good, Orochimaru murmured in a purring voice, then looked towards Kabuto. Could you please show her to level 4? He nodded slightly more eagerly than he'd intended, of course. He looked towards the woman, allowing his gaze to measure her up. Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be working as from tomorrow. Somewhat bristling silence lingered while they walked through white hallways, then entered an elevator that took them all the way to underground. Scent of antiseptics and something that reminded him of death could be sensed in the air when they finally stepped into level 4. He pointed towards 3 huge, white doors that had L1 foot, L2, and L3 written on them. Those are the laboratories in which you'll be working. Most of the work consists of making different tests and examining the subjects. Those are all things I assume you're familiar with. The woman nodded, looking around as though evaluating. Just then a loud, heart-wrenching scream ran through the entire floor. The brunette looked at him with one eyebrow high up. I assume that's nothing uncommon? He waved a hand dismissively. It's just one of the subjects, nothing important. He then turned to leave. Feel free to look around. I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. As soon as she could be sure that she was alone, Ten pressed a device nearby her right ear. Danzo? I just thought I should report I'm in. In the meantime Kabuto returned to Orochimaru's office. His eyebrow immediately quirked at the look upon the man's face. Has something come up? We just received a new lead of that pest who saw you at work. There was an unmistakable tinge of pleasure in the older man's voice. Eccentric, chilling Snake's eyes flashed. Soon enough, we'll be able to get rid of a huge problem and take back what's ours. During his life 8-year-old Konohamaru had grown used to making money of everything he possibly could. As a street rat, which was what most called him, he didn't really have a choice, no matter how much some of the things he did sickened him. That night of fall that was slowly dawning to a day, he knew from wide experience that he'd be getting plenty of money soon when a man with gray hair, sharp glass-covered eyes and long, black jacket walked towards him. He pushed himself up from the street he'd been occupying. Can I help you, sir? He'd learned the hard way that sweet-talking worked much better than frowns. Or so it was with most. This man looked at him as though he'd been nothing more than an insect. I need you to deliver a package for me. I've gathered your friends with Uzumaki Naruto. He nodded, somewhat alarmed. How could this guy know about his friends? That's right. Looking towards the man's hands, he found a package that wasn't much bigger than a candy box. It seemed harmless enough. Is that it? The man nodded. Yes. He quirked an eyebrow. Now came the best part. How much will you pay me? Unhurriedly, the man showed what looked like 30,000 yens to him, eyes blank. 2. Make sure he has this package in 24 hours or I'll look for you and get that money back. Got it? He nodded, chills running down his spine. He accepted the money and the package when they were handed to him, of course. With that the man turned around sharply and walked away. He shivered a bit, but in the end decided that money was money. He had a job to do. Chapter 3. Familiar Faces. Very early that morning, Sasuke woke up from the mattress she'd occupied every night for 2 weeks when hearing sounds of fear and discomfort that disturbed her sleep. It didn't take her long to figure out where the noises were coming from, and she prepared her gun in a second, eyes flashing. Something was wrong with Naruto. Her moves were soundless and quick while she made her way to the blonde's room. She stood behind the door for about 2 seconds, listening, before sneaking in. Her eyebrows furrowed while she listened and scanned through the room carefully, prepared for anything and her weapon held high. Nothing seemed to be wrong. All of a sudden Naruto emitted what sounded like a tiny gasp, then muttered barely coherently, "What are you?" "Don't." She understood in an instant, and put away the weapon with a loud growl. Nightmares. Nice. She wasn't sure if she felt more annoyed or infuriated for having been bothered with something like this, but nonetheless couldn't make herself leave the room. Instead she walked up to the blonde, feeling uncharacteristically confused as to what to do. Naruto's bad dreams, it seemed, intensified just as she stopped, because the sounds the man was making grew louder, and usually rather cheerful face filled with an incredible amount of fear. Giving in to something lingering deep underneath her skin, she raised a hand and laid it to the whimpering Uzumaki's cheek. The change she met was so dramatic that she had to blink twice uncharacteristically. At once all noises and restless movements stopped, and Naruto calmed down completely, leaning eagerly against the warmth of her touch. Former terror was replaced by the tiniest of smiles. She sighed and closed her eyes, far from comfortable with the situation. This was not a part of her job description. After what felt like hours, although her wristwatch said no more than 15 minutes had passed, Naruto finally calmed down, sinking deep into untroubled sleep. Slowly, not wanting to risk waking up the blonde, she pulled her hand away from him. She was confused by how hard it was to turn around and walk out of the room. She was somewhat surprised to find Kiba walking out of a bathroom, scratching his head and yawning. She'd never thought of the brunette as an early bird. Once noticing him, the man immediately stopped scratching with some embarrassment. "So those bad dreams woke you up, too?" The Inuzuka then realized something and frowned with apparent suspicion. "What were you doing in his room, anyway?" She fought the urge to growl, "Something I shouldn't have to do." She then started to make her way towards the apartment's kitchen. "I'm going to make some breakfast. Are you going to help or keep asking pointless questions?" She could just tell Kiba rolled his eyes before following her, muttering something she couldn't make out. 10-10 had completed many missions, most of them hard both physically and mentally. But nonetheless, the past 2 weeks had been almost more than she could bear. Orochimaru's laboratory was a hell. In 2 weeks she'd treated, or tried to, at least, several subjects with so badly disturbed minds that it had taken a lot of her to not burst into tears. And all those so-called scientific experiments she'd seen. This was no place for human beings. With those thoughts circling around her head, it wasn't easy to keep her expression blank while Kabuto led her towards a new laboratory. "Today, you'll make a little checkup on number 2751. I should warn you, though. He's quite unpredictable. Don't look him into eyes, and avoid fast movements." "Understood?" She nodded, fighting the urge to shiver. "Of course. I did read through the file." "Good." The man opened a huge, heavily locked door. "You got 10 minutes. Without giving much of a response she entered, and instantly felt her heart jump. Sitting on the floor, with his back leaned against a wall and arms wrapped around his legs, sat an undeniably attractive young man with long, white hair and startlingly dull green eyes. She spoke after gathering herself for a moment. "Morning." She broke Kabuto's rules in a matter of seconds. Their eyes met, and in a flash she could tell that there was something strange going on. It was like she'd known him. She didn't pay attention to those thoughts then, though, after all, this was a duty, an assignment she needed to take care of. The young man glanced towards her with more suspicion than she'd ever met before, his muscles tensing up so that she prepared herself to fight. "I've never seen you before." His voice was husky, most likely due to lack of use. She nodded while starting to prepare her equipment, her eyes scanning through the room for security cameras as subtly as possible. She detected 5. "That's right," she confirmed. She felt a heavy sting in her chest while preparing a needle almost full of brownish substance, barely daring to think of what it was. "But now, it's time for your medication and examination." The man's, Kimimaro's, as she remembered learning from his file, eyes turned dark and defeated, and she had difficulties with hiding her emotions. "All right." He outstretched an arm, and she was chilled by how many needle marks covered it. "You should get over with it fast. The symptoms are growing stronger already." She frowned lightly. Symptoms? She'd seen the other subjects. If this man was anything like they, she was in a trouble. Kimimaro refused to look at her while she started to prepare his arm. The next few moments ticked by in a silence. The man winced slightly when she pushed a needle through his skin, but didn't move. Quite soon the drug had been given, and the man relaxed slightly, starting to breathe more easily. She couldn't keep herself from asking, although she'd sworn to herself that she wouldn't get attached, "Are you okay?" Kimimaro looked up at her with apparent surprise. It took a while before he spoke. "You seem different from the others." "Yeah," she thought bitterly, starting to prepare for a medical checkup. "I wish I was. I'm going to listen to your breathing and measure your blood pressure. Stay as still and quiet as you can, alright?" He nodded, stiffening once more when she touched his skin. Making every move as carefully as possible, she checked out his vitals, and didn't like the results. His heart carried a strange side tone to it, unlike anything she'd ever heard before. And although he seemed pretty terrified, his blood pressure was much lower than average. Just what was she dealing with? The room's door opened just as she was about to make questions. When turning her head she found Kabuto, who had a demanding look upon his face. "What's taking you so long?" With how much training she'd been through, she wasn't fazed by his tone. "I was supposed to make a proper medical checkup, right?" She glanced towards the subject, a human being whose eyes now held so little trust when looking into hers that it broke her heart, and felt the need to say something. "I will come back soon, okay?" She wished she could have done a lot more. The white-haired looked at her, then, to both their surprise, nodded barely traceably. With that she and Kabuto turned around and left the room. The man didn't speak until the door was firmly closed. "You're too soft on them." She shrugged. "Maybe so. But at least he's starting to trust me." With that she started to walk away. "Are you coming or not? I thought we had a lot to do." After hesitating a second Kabuto did as ordered. While they went she had to use her all to not turn and look towards the room locking Kimimaro in. For some reason she had a feeling that she'd visit there a lot in future. Pretty late that evening Naruto was ready to bounce up and down out of sheer boredom and anxiety. He figured he had every right to feel that way after observing Kiba's playful and half-hearted, pretty pathetic attempts to catch Sasuke's interest all day. He wondered why he felt so troubled by his friend's harmless fooling around. All of a sudden he nearly fell down from the couch he was occupying when sounds of loud pops reached his ears. In an instant very unpleasant flashes filled his mind, and he shivered for a moment. Kiba, who was stood in a kitchen, gave him a weird look. "Geez, Naruto. It's only microwave popcorn." Sasuke looked at him with furrowed eyebrows, and he had a nasty feeling that the woman could see straight into his thoughts. "Are you okay?" "No," he scoffed, gesturing wildly with his hands and arms. I'm losing my mind for being locked up in here, okay? I need to go out, before I'll go crazy." Kiba chuckled, managing to lighten the mood. "You mean, even crazier than you already are?" He pouted at his best friend. "I'm serious. I swear I'll start climbing up the walls and stuff like that soon." "You guys have seen The Exorcist, right?" Sasuke seemed extremely irritated. "Naruto, no. The last time I took you out of this apartment you almost got yourself killed. I won't jeopardize my sanity any further than I have already." He felt defeated for a moment, until a sly look appeared to his face. "Okay. So no going out, but I can still ask a couple of friends to come over, right?" "Ah." Sasuke seemed to see right through his little game. She folded her arms while arching an eyebrow. "How many friends?" Seeing her near glare, he let his shoulders drop. If he'd been a little more childish he might have gone close to pouting. "Just 5, okay? I've known all of them for a long time, they're trustworthy. So wipe off that look." Sasuke all but stared at him for almost a full minute until she finally nodded stiffly. "Fine. But on one condition. I'm also inviting someone. If there'll be so many people, I need backup to make sure things don't get out of hand." He merely grinned. "Sure." At the moment, he would have promised pretty much anything for a chance to have some human contact. Although a part of him celebrated his victory, the rest was slightly more hesitant. Somehow, he was starting to have a very bad feeling about this. One of the things Karen had never been blessed with was patience. That's why she all but seethed with fury while her newly assigned partner, a blonde named Deidara, who'd recently lost his former, longtime partner Sasori, toyed with a spineless agent of ANBU named Morino Idate. Deidara's knife traveled up and down the shivering, sweating man's throat while dangerous blue eyes kept the others in a firm hold. "So, are you gonna tell me that little pest's address? Because I know it's in ANBU's database although it's classified. I'd really hate having to look for it myself, I don't know a thing, I swear." Idate squeaked in a voice that hurt her ears. If I would I'd tell you, honestly." In the end she had enough of listening to the man, and threw a knife straight towards Deidara, narrowly missing the man. "Can't you see that he's useless? Just finish him off so we can get the hell out of here." The blonde grinned. "We've still got time, right? I want to have some fun." She rolled her eyes. Just then her cell phone started to ring. She arched an eyebrow at who it was. "What's up?" "I know the location." She listened for a couple of minutes for the instructions, then hung up. "Sorry, but it's go time. I just got the address. Apparently only you're allowed to show up. That little twit knows my face too well." Deidara shrugged. "Oh well, maybe next time, Blue eyes met Idate's terrified ones. "Sorry, but it looks like I've gotta go earlier than I expected." In a couple of minutes a scream could be heard. After the so-called party was about to start, Naruto found himself a lot more like a normal person. At very least he wasn't isolated from the world anymore. Although he wasn't allowed to tell his friends what was going on, at least he got to see them. Naruto was at the very edge of his balance while looking for some hopefully eatable potato chips from the kitchen's highest cupboard. That's why he was so focused on his job that Sasuke, who hadn't spoken for the past minute, managed to catch him off guard. I still don't think this is a good idea. He rolled his eyes, then turned abruptly. We can trust my friends, okay? It was then his balance chose that it wouldn't hold for another second. Before Sasuke could even react, he'd fallen on the woman, taking them both to the floor so that their lips nearly touched. Kiba snorted while walking past them to open the door. Now that's cliched. Sasuke gave him a very nasty look before pushing him away. You're a freaking accident magnet, she scoffed. He merely rolled his eyes while obeying, feeling how a blush kept deepening on his cheeks. Oh, shut it. They just managed to get up before a very familiar voice appeared. Now what the heck are my eyes seeing? The sound was his co-worker, Tamariz. They turned around to see the woman stood behind them in what he knew to be her usual leather attire. She arched an eyebrow at Sasuke. Ah, I see you have a friend visiting. He shrugged, coming close to snorting, if that's what you want to call her. Tamari seemed to lose her interest towards his companion, most likely deciding to give him a third degree later. So, where have you been, anyway? Iruka's getting pretty annoyed. He winced. True enough, his boss was a reasonable man, but with how many shifts he'd cancelled already, he wouldn't have been surprised if he'd been fired straight away. Let's just say that I've been a bit busy. Tamari seemed somewhat confused by his cryptic answer. Oh. She then noticed how Shikamaru, another coworker, entered and grinned brightly. I've gotta get going. See you around. Sasuke seemed to be about to say something, until her eyes darkened at the newest arrival. Fashionably late as always, the woman scoffed. In a matter of seconds, before he could ask a thing, a man with bluish hair he didn't know was stood before them, measuring him up. So, Sasuke. Aren't you going to introduce me? Sasuke frowned. Where were you? The man winced. Trust me, you don't want to know. The new arrival then looked towards him again. Now, the introductions. Sasuke sighed, seeming extremely irritated. Suigetsu, this is my newest pain in the ass, Naruto. Naruto, this is Suigetsu, my ex-husband. Naruto almost choked on his breath, and coughed so loudly that everyone around them turned to look with suspicious glances. Ex-husband? He stared at the young woman, who couldn't possibly be any older than he. But, you're only... Sasuke's eyebrow twitched. Yes, I know. Suigetsu shrugged. We were 18 and drunk. But oh well, it was fun while it lasted, most of the time, at least. Did the man just pinch Sasuke's ass while looking at the woman with a mischievous grin? Besides, we still have quite a bit of fun sometimes. He shuddered, having a feeling that he did not want to know more. Sasuke, apparently, was desperate to switch topic. There's something urgent I need to take care of. She glanced towards Naruto. But I'm not sure if I dare to leave you alone for long enough. Suigetsu waved a hand. I'm also in ANBU, remember? I think your friend's pretty safe with me. Sasuke seemed skeptical for a moment, then, apparently coming to a realization that she had no other choice, started to leave. Fine. Just try not to rip each other apart. I'm not in the mood for a bloodbath tonight. With that she walked away. He scoffed. Has she always been that much of a sunshine? Suigetsu grinned. Pretty much. The man's expression then grew a little bit more solemn. You should give her some slack, though. She's had it a bit rough lately. He arched an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? Did Suigetsu just shudder? Do you have any idea what she'd do to me if I tell you? Actually, he did, and that's why he didn't press any further. She likes you, you know? Suigetsu's words nearly made him choke on the air in his throat again. He laughed loudly once recovering. And exactly what gives you such an impression? The man shrugged. Let's just say that I know her pretty well. I know these things long before she does. He snorted and rolled his eyes, but couldn't really chase away the warmth that appeared to his cheeks. Yeah, right. I bet she's looking after me so she can kill me herself. Suigetsu chuckled at that. Not much later Sasuke reappeared, the look upon her face immediately warning him that he wouldn't like what was to come. We need to talk. Black eyes seemed between annoyed and amused when flashing towards Suigetsu. Enko needs you back in the base. Something twinkled in Suigetsu's eyes while the man started to leave. I'll better get going, then. There was a tiny wave of hand. See you later. Feeling somewhat confused, he responded to the hold when Sasuke wrapped a pair of arms around him and they started to pretend that they were dancing. Only not to arouse suspicion while talking since everyone else was dancing as well, a part of his brain reminded him furiously. His eyebrows furrowed with suspicion while they moved. Why'd I have a feeling that I'm not going to like this? Listen to me carefully, Sasuke hissed into his ear, sending shivers he couldn't understand through him. They moved again, as though really dancing. This get-together needs to end. He fought the urge to pout. Why? He hadn't even had the time to talk to pretty much anyone. The woman took a moment before answering. They found another body, agent. Some information may have leaked. He shuddered, his head whirring 10,000 miles per hour. In the end he snarled, rolling his eyes, fine. Just give me one more hour, will you? I'm not gonna see them pretty much at all for a long time. Sasuke rolled her eyes skywards, muttering something that sounded like, drama queen. Fine, 1 hour, but no more, got it? He nodded solemnly. So only 1 hour, huh? He was dead set to make the most of it. Sakura wasn't having exactly the time of her life while sitting beside Sai in a tiny, stinking office. Not only was it much later than she would have wanted and she'd been supposed to be home hours ago, but she also had to spend time with him. For Lee, she reminded herself harshly. You need to do this for Lee. I know you can. Sakura, are you listening to me? She shot an unnaturally sharp look towards Sai. Yeah. She then glanced towards all the papers in front of them. So, what's next? That's what I was trying to tell you. The man pointed towards a file while taking one of his own. You take Hoshigaki Kisame. Feeling unpleasant chills at the man's tone, she outstretched a hand. It turned out that she was a little bit too tired. Her hand slipped, hitting a tiny vase. It dropped and broke to pieces, ripping a cut to her wrist. She snarled loudly, damn it. Sai hesitated for a moment before moving. She shivered when he took her hand into his. That doesn't look too bad. Still holding her wrist surprisingly tenderly, he fished a bandage from his bag that had been thrown to a chair nearby. In a matter of seconds the wound was patched up. There, done. For the first time during that evening she felt like smiling. Thanks. She gave him a look. I would have never thought you to be the type that knows first aid. Sai shrugged. It seems to come in handy with a partner like you. Had she not been so good at keeping herself in line, she might have said something she wouldn't have regretted, especially considering how edgy the late hour made her. That chauvinistic, inconsiderate. Sai, most likely sensing that now was the proper time leave, got up. I'll go and get us some more coffee. You do that, she stated through her teeth. Once he was gone and it became silent once more, she squeezed her eyes tightly shut. She felt like slamming her head against the table before her with exasperation. Fate really had something huge against her. She was almost startled when the dial tone of her cell phone pierced the heavy silence that had fallen. She gave a deep sigh when noticing who it was. Tara, what are you still doing up? Babyter fell asleep, and I missed you. There was a moment's silence. When are you, Ming home? She swallowed down another sigh. As soon as I can, I promise. She had to wait for a while to make sure her voice wouldn't break. Now to go sleep, okay? I'll be there in the morning. K. The voice was much happier already. Love you, mommy. She couldn't keep herself from smiling a bit. Love you too. Good night. As soon as she hung up she let out a deep breath, rubbing her temple. When had things become this complicated? She barely managed to chase away all the disturbing thoughts on time when hearing Sai's steps. She felt mildly alarmed by the look on his usually stoic face. What's wrong? Remember that one suspicious name we were supposed to take a look at, Namikaze Naruto? She nodded, feeling mildly irritated. Of course. Why? There'd clearly been a thick file, but now, it was gone. There was a small wrinkle on the man's forehead. There wasn't a trace left of all the information. A deep frown made its way to her face while she shivered, feeling extremely dark vibrations. What the hell is going on around here? Naruto and Sasuke were equally stunned and disturbed by the fact that they felt no particular desire to get away each other that night. For his part, Naruto blamed the affect of alcohol and company. So much fun he had amongst his friends and colleagues, that he lost track of time early on. During the past hour he'd also lost track on how many sharp shots he'd poured down while talking to his friends. Had he been a bit more coherent, he might have noticed how dangerous Sasuke's expression turned when he stumbled to lean against the woman all of a sudden, almost falling down. He grinned at her sheepishly. "Ori." The raven's eyes squinted to slits. "Off, now," she barked out. In a more sober state, he might have been embarrassed by how much fun his friends had while they watched the display. Once more, he blamed all the drinks he'd taken for what he did next. Instead of letting go, which would have been the best thing to do, considering both his physical and mental health, he wrapped his arms around the Uchiha, almost leaning against her. "Nah, I want to dance." Shikamaru rolled his eyes at this. "This is not going to be pretty." Gaara merely rolled his eyes with a solemn expression that also carried a hint of amusement. "It's like watching a train accident about to occur." Sasuke took a step closer to Naruto, something that might have been called mischief on someone else's face in her eyes. "Dance, in your condition?" "Yeah, right?" He wasn't sure if it was intentional or not, but the woman's one hand seemed to linger a bit too close to his behind while warm breath tingled his face, making him feel dizzy. He snorted. "You'll pay for that one." Naruto found himself grinning when Sasuke shuddered when his lips lingered right beside the woman's ear after a moment, forming soundless words. That's what she got for being a tease. He, however, should have never underestimated Sasuke. His heart thumped when the raven glanced up at him through eyelashes, one eyebrow arched. "So you want to play?" And with those words as his only warning he was spinning, physically and mentally. His head spun while they sunk into a heated dance. His hands moved, seeming to be everywhere at once, and he was pretty sure that he moaned embarrassingly when Sasuke's disturbingly experienced fingers played with his hair, then moved to his neck. He gulped thickly. "Oh damn." In the background, Shikamaru burst into laughter. "Oh damn, he's a goner." Had he been able to, he would have shot a dirty look towards his friend. "Oh shut it." He gasped when he became pinned to a wall, with Sasuke's face only millimeters from his own. His heart, the entire club and time itself waited stock still, anxious to know what was to happen. "Time's up," the Uchiha announced eventually, sounding mildly out of breath. He groaned, boiling inside, and his eyes narrowed. That was low. Did he just see amusement upon the woman's face? "For your information." Onyx's eyes seemed hazardous. "The next time you touch me like that I'll chop off your fingers, one by one." With that she turned around sharply. "Now, I have to go to the bathroom. Stay within Suigetsu's eyesight in the meantime. I trust the apartment to be empty when I come back." He watched her distancing back, muttering drunken insults and protests under his breath. In less than a minute Temari and Shino had left with brief byes. Shikamaru seemed to be almost chuckling while resting a hand to his shoulder. "All I can say, my friend, is congratulations." He gave the brunette a dry look. "Hilarious." Acting as though never having heard him, the man said his byes and left. Soon after Gaara and Neji appeared to him, with the redhead's arms wrapped almost possessively around the brunette's waistline. Something he hadn't seen often lingered in the depths of the redhead's eyes. "I'm sorry the party ended this soon. It would have been good to talk." Despite the fact that his heart was jumping, in the aftermath of the dance, and with the realization that now, he'd have to go back to his dangerous new life, locked inside and hunted, he managed to grin. "Just go home already, you two." His eyes flashed in a knowing manner. "I bet you've got better things to do than watching me brooding around." Outside the house, Gaara was the only one to whom he'd told the truth of what was going on. They'd been friends for so long that hiding things was out of question. Take care of yourself, will you?" Neji said in his turn. He nodded, still attempting to grin a bit. Just then a thought crossed his mind, and he looked around. Still not a trace of Sasuke, and Suigetsu seemed to be busy fighting with someone over the phone. A while back Kiba had gone to take Akamaru out. This was his last chance. "You know what? I'll walk you out." He'd less than a minute outside the house. How dangerous could that be? Besides he needed this, for the sake of his sanity. He hadn't been allowed to leave the house pretty much at all since Sasuke's arrival. They walked out in near silence, then said byes once more. Something ached a little inside him while he watched the two take off with Gaara's motorcycle. He couldn't help wondering when he'd get to see those two again. He was just about to go inside, wondering with some fear if Sasuke had noticed his absence already, when an unfamiliar man's voice made him freeze. You sure were hard to find, Very slowly, he turned around to meet a man with long, blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. He gulped against his will. What the hell? Chills ran down his spine when cold blue eyes locked even more tightly with his. What is it about? He demanded, although he wasn't really in the position to ask for anything. A toothy grin was aimed his way. Why don't you come with me and find out, Something hard was pressed against his side, and it didn't take him long to figure out what it was. The eyes looking into his turned dangerous. I insist. Gulping thickly, he started to walk as the man did, casting a longing glance towards the building's main entrance while they approach a red car waiting nearby. Sasuke's gonna kill me for this, he mused gloomily. If this guy doesn't beat her to it, that is. Most definitely noticing how stiff he went, the man glanced towards him with what looked like mirth. Don't worry. If my mission would be to kill you, you'd be dead already, Had he been in a different state of mind, he might have snorted. How comforting. He took a quick look towards the blonde. Then what do you want from me? The man shrugged. Information, and that disc you took. He frowned, not quite catching on. A disc? Then, in flash, it all dawned on him. That agent he'd seen being murdered, he'd had a disc. Oh, that one I took when. He then became confused, almost alarmed, once more. But, how can he know about it? What the hell's going on around here? He opened his mouth to ask, but never got the chance to. For only a flash later they both tensed up when a long, extremely sharp knife was thrown straight towards them. It missed them with only an inch. Looking up to a nearby roof, he met a young woman with long black hair and dark, flaming eyes. Deidara, leave him alone. The woman snarled. He's ours. The blonde-haired man, Deidara as he now knew, grinned yet again. Kin? The man greeted. I was wondering who Orochimaru would send to slow me down, The blonde then shrugged. Sorry, but I got to him first. Finders keepers, Without saying a word, the woman jumped down with a back flip like one of those he'd seen in movies, and was stood right before them so fast that he could barely register it. Deidara, on the other hand, seemed very much prepared. He barely had the time to duck and scramble out of the way before the first hits were exchanged. He'd never seen another fight like that. The two attacked each other like tornadoes, clearly having been trained for several years. Kicks and punches were exchanged in a dizzying speed. In the end, Deidara had the younger woman trapped firmly against a wall, one of his undoubtedly many knives placed to her throat. Now, Barbie. Why don't you go back home and tell your boss that we found other use for your little problem, As a response, Kin threw one of her legs forward, managing to push the man enough out of balance to vigor away from his trap. Her eyes flamed while two blades fell to her hands from the sleeves of her long jacket. I've never failed before, she announced. She threw the blades, which the man dodged narrowly, and with the reward Orochimaru-sama has promised me, I'm not about to start now. One more grin appeared to Deidara's face, making him seem excited, almost. So you want to play, Steel flashed in moonlight. Do go on. That, Kin did. Naruto knew escaping would have been the most sensible thing to do, but none of his muscles would move while he stood there, mesmerized by the sight before him. So worked up by watching the two he was, that he didn't sense anyone approaching until a harsh hand was clasped against his mouth. He tried to yelp with startle, but barely any sound made it through his lips. Do you still feel like running away after this little lesson? Sasuke's very familiar voice hissed all of a sudden. After a moment he regained his composure. He shook his head like a 5-year-old, feeling utterly humiliated. Good. Sasuke's voice carried something that told him the rest of the night would be far from pleasant. Now let's get the hell out of here. We've got a lot to talk about. He gave a look towards the two fighters who'd spot that something was going on at any given moment, and understood that he had no choice. They disappeared like shadows. It wasn't rare that Kakashi found himself overworking, but it wasn't often he would have stayed this late, almost until the next morning. What made it easier, however, was that he wasn't alone. After watching Hayate visit downstairs, which was where Yugo was working, to get something, from paper and pens to staplers, for about 50 times he decided that it was time to do something. As amusing as observing the dance was, he was getting a headache. You know what? It's time to bring an end to this farce, he announced. The brunette coughed as though choking. What? If you're not more interested than that, then I'm going. To emphasize his words he got up. See? It isn't harder than this. I'm already going. Hayate coughed again, giving a slightly nasty look towards him. That's very low of you. The man, however, got up and left, moved slow and reluctant. He grinned just a little bit while watching the brunette's back distance. Well, finally. Then giving a deep sigh, he made his way towards a break room, already dreaming of the insanely strong coffee he'd soon have. He just managed to sit with a cup of coffee and important papers when his peace was disturbed. Kakashi. The mere sound of Danzu's voice made him want to wince. Turning his head, he met a pair of sharp eyes. I didn't expect to see anyone else working at this hour. He took a tiny sip of coffee and refocused on his papers, never once leaving the older man completely out of his sight. He shivered when feeling Danzu's eyes on him. Peering to side, he found the man sneaking a glance towards his papers. Are those about the witnesses? He closed the file, giving a loud sign of mistrust. Do not pry was one essential rule of ANBU. Most of their cases were so highly classified that they couldn't have shared any information, and they needed to trust each other enough to stay out. Danzo was crossing a line, and he had a feeling he didn't even want to know why. Yes? Was all he gave in a slash-like tone, then got up. Sorry, but there's still a lot I need to take care of, so. Danzo nodded, following intently while he started to walk away. He'd almost made it out of the room until a tone he couldn't quite recognize snatched him. You know, Kakashi. A good agent knows when they've faced a mission that can't be completed successfully. Some battles aren't meant to be won. Without saying a word he walked away. As soon as he was out of the room he found a deep frown appearing. He'd always had good instincts. If he hadn't, he would have never survived this long. And right now every single cell in his being screamed that something was very, very wrong. Hayate, who was just walking back from visiting Yugo, cut his trail of thought. Still nothing, she had a phone call. But at least I talked to her. Isn't that the key point? The man then noticed his stiffness and seemed a bit worried. What's wrong? His expression darkened. I don't know yet. But I have a feeling that it won't be pleasant. Night was already over by the time Naruto and Sasuke were stood by an extremely poor-shaped apartment the blonde had never seen before. He frowned. What is this place? Sasuke's expression wasn't a happy one. A safe house. We can't go to your apartment until those two idiots have disappeared. We'll be spending the night here. I already reported Suigetsu, so ANBU should be taking care of things around your house. Naruto's spirits definitely weren't as high as possible. He was tired, having a headache as hangover started to kick in, and scared beyond any belief by the close call he'd just had. Spending a night in this dump, certainly didn't help matters. You've been quiet for a full minute, Sasuke pointed out, startling him out of badly jumbled thoughts. That's a record. He gave the other a moody look. Shut it. Sasuke seemed to hold back a sigh. Look, what you did today was extremely dangerous. I know I made the mistake of leaving you into someone else's hands, but you could have had yourself killed. He could actually feel tears nearly pooling. Oh fuck? He was not about to cry in front of her. You think I don't know how much is at stake? I've been scared to death since I saw that agent get killed, and now. He took a deep, sharp breath, gesturing wildly with his arms. I'm already scared, so there's no point in accusing me. Naruto. Sasuke's voice was so sharp that he just had to look at the woman. Her eyes were flashing with something that wasn't familiar to him. My job is to keep you alive, whatever the cost, and that's what I intend to do. Did those onyx orbs just soften? I'm not going to let you die, idiot. Something inside him softened and melted. He didn't even notice that he took Sasuke's hand. Nor did he notice that the raven squeezed back subconsciously. Surprisingly enough, a tiny smile appeared to his lips. That's good to hear, he murmured in an unexpectedly soft voice. Neither of them knew what might have gotten started if they hadn't been interrupted. Naruto-san, Naruto-san. Turning his head with startle, he found Konohamaru approaching. He grinned brightly. Hey, kiddo. The boy panted heavily once stopping nearby. Gee, good, I thought I'd be late. He frowned. Late for what? Managing to breathe somewhat properly, the boy held out a box for him. I was told to give this to you in 24 hours. He frowned with suspicion, but Sasuke beat him to speaking. Give that thing to me, will you? While Sasuke started to work on the box, his attention returned to Konohamaru. Who gave that to you, anyway? The boy shrugged. This guy with gray hair and glasses. He seemed pretty nasty. His face turned chalk white with realization the exact same second Sasuke all but roared while throwing the box away. "Get down, now." More out of instinct than anything else he and Konohamaru did as ordered. He was faintly aware of Sasuke dashing to his side until there was a bang so loud that his ears were blocked for a long moment. An energy field pushed him so roughly that he became slammed face down to the pavement. Several minutes passed by before he was finally able to hear and move slightly. His head buzzed, unable to catch on properly. Sasuke looked at him with darkened eyes. "Are you in one piece?" He coughed heavily when smoke and dust filled his lungs. "Are all your missions like this?" Sasuke shrugged, paying barely any attention to him while investigating their surroundings. "Only the easiest ones." Her black eyes were terrifyingly sharp when clashing with his. "Now do you understand why I want you to be careful?" He could only nod while staring at the destruction around them, damaged walls and badly charred pavement. He was shivering furiously and his heart thumping million times per hour. He leaned against Sasuke without noticing it. So, these guys were really ready to go this far to keep his mouth shut? "I'm going to die, aren't I?" During his career as a crime scene investigator, Izumo Kamizuki had seen a huge number of things that had followed him all the way to his darkest nightmares. What he saw that particular day when entering a deviously beautiful house, however, crossed all his darkest imaginations. Blood, it seemed to be everywhere, along with various pieces of several human bodies. Whoever had performed the slaughter in this house had obviously meant business. He took a deep breath, barely managing to speak. "So, what do we have?" It told something about the severity of the situation that even his best friend, Kotetsu Hagane, seemed horrified while staring at one of the battered corpses, face chalk white. At least 5 bodies, 2 female, 3 male. The man swallowed thickly, most likely to control nausea. "This is the best conditioned one of them." Not really wanting to, he turned his gaze, and quite soon wished he wouldn't have been on duty so he would have allowed to throw up. There, before him on the bathroom floor, lay a body that had been beaten up and shot to the head so badly that there was no way to identify the victim. Looking up, he felt his eyes sting just a little when seeing bloodied scratch marks on the bathroom's tiny window. Gosh, he could almost hear the screams. "Don't you dare," he gasped, careful to make it silent. "What the hell happened here? It's your child, goddammit." Although it was the last thing he wanted to do, he approached the body, then knelt down slowly. The stench of urine and vomit he met made him want to reel backwards. He coughed a bit before managing to pull out a tiny recorder and speak. "Victim number 1, male." He gathered himself for a moment before looking at the corpse once more. Multiple injuries, clear signs of severe abuse. Also a gunshot wound on head, caused by a weapon of big caliber. He sighed heavily, closing his eyes for a moment, judging by battle marks and the wounds. "I'd say the victim was tortured for a long time before death." "Don't worry, this won't take long." It seemed to take forever before he'd finally processed the corpse and was allowed to get up. He waited for a moment before speaking. "So, where's the next one?" 2 bodies in the bedroom. Did Kotetsu's voice actually shudder? "I'm warning you, though. It's not a pretty sight. Good night. I hope you'll have sweet dreams." He shuddered when turning away from the horrendous sight, feeling far more repulsed than would have been professional. He couldn't understand how he'd be able to face the rest. The voice of one of his colleagues barely reached him. "Guys, call an ambulance." The tone was shocked, filled with disbelief. "We've got a living one here." Chapter 4. Shadows Arise. 1.5 months later. 1. Sasuke gasped loudly, uncharacteristically, while her eyes flew open and she bolted into a sitting position. In an instant she'd pulled out a weapon and pointed it towards the weight she could feel on her legs and stomach. After a couple of seconds she first blinked, then growled with annoyance when finding nothing more dangerous than Akamaru. "That damn moron," she snarled while putting away her weapon once more. "He should be glad I didn't finish off his mutt when he lets it hassle around everywhere." Akamaru tilted its head, seeming confused. Relief, however, was the main emotion. So she was in the safe house to which even Kiba and Akamaru had moved to accompany her and Naruto about 3 weeks ago. Everything was all right. "Stop pestering Akamaru." She couldn't deny being surprised by hearing Naruto's chiding voice. "He's done nothing to you, okay?" She rolled her eyes while all but pushing Akamaru off of her and getting up. "Whatever." After thinking about it for a moment, she walked towards the kitchen where the blonde was working on something. I've never thought you to be the type that wakes up early. The man shrugged. I had a weird dream and couldn't go back to sleep. I thought I should do something useful. It was around then she started to feel a sensation of dread. Feeling almost reluctant to do so, she walked closer to the blonde to find something pitch black on a frying pan. She wrinkled her nose and felt like wincing when a horrifying stench of something scorching finally met her nose. You don't do this often, do you? The blonde glared at her. Do I look like I'd be interested to hear your opinion? She rolled her eyes once more and sighed. Make room. She was much too aware of how they touched each other while she took over the kitchen, starting to prepare another set of breakfast. You can either help me or get out of here. Naruto muttered something under his breath, but joined in anyhow. Only the two of them didn't notice how close to each other they were and how little words they needed while working together. In a room not too far away, Kiba grinned while watching the two, and scratched Akamaru's head when the dog made its way to him. Now look at that. Boy, he whispered. It looks like we finally have some progress. Akamaru barked as an agreement. Yes, 1010 hated her newest mission, especially that morning after having been attacked by a subject she knew as Jugo when the man had had one of his episodes. But she also had to admit that there were some tiny, forbidden highlights. Kimimaro frowned a bit when she entered the cell he was locked into, without a doubt noticing a patched-up wound on her face, and the bandage covering her hand. You've been harmed. She smiled, enjoying the slight bit of closeness they'd managed to gain during the past weeks, although she shouldn't have. It's nothing serious, just tiny scratches. The man's green eyes darkened, turned incredibly sad and ashamed. Was it one of us? Hard as she tried, she couldn't bring herself to respond. In some other state of mind she might have noticed that her hand brushed his unnecessarily while she prepared to give him yet another injection. I'm sorry, but I need to give you this medication, she sighed, preparing a needle that seemed horrendously long. It's all right. The man's response, it seemed, shocked them both. He looked away. It doesn't hurt that much when you do it. Once more she was unable to hide a trace of a smile. That's good to hear. She lingered behind once she was done, purposely doing everything as slowly as possible. She succeeded, and was there for Kimimaro when the effects of the injection started to kick in and the white-haired winced with pain. It took a long time before the man finally relaxed as pain subsided. In the end she couldn't keep herself from speaking, although she knew he was sensitive to all sounds now. Do you ever wish to get away? She looked around the depressing room. To leave this? The look on Kimimaro's face was incredibly sad. No. Gosh, the man was so sincere. Yet again he looked away. Orochimaru-sama, he's given me everything, food, shelter, strength, protection. It's because of him I'm alive. He cast his eyes downwards. Besides, where would I go? This is all I have. She frowned, feeling sadness she shouldn't have experienced on duty. You must have someone out there waiting for you. Kimimaro didn't say a word. And before she could do so, either, there was loud bleeping that announced her time with him was up. She fought the urge to wince. I've gotta go. But before that, she could sense the confused look he gave her when she touched his hand while passing by. And just so you know, you're not alone. As soon as she was out of the laboratory she leaned against a wall and closed her eyes, gritting teeth. She was dangerously close to crossing a strictly prohibited line. And she had a dark feeling it had cost her dearly. Later that day, Naruto was too happy about getting out of the house to wonder where they were going while he followed Sasuke into a building he'd never been in before. I can't believe you actually took me out of the house. Sasuke didn't seem all that excited. Neither can I now move it. He rolled his eyes, only to discover that the gesture certainly didn't come from the bottom of his heart. Not that he would have ever admitted it to his so-called bodyguard. Lately, he'd spent so much time with Sasuke that it was almost weird to even think about being without her. Besides, so long as he was finally out of the house, he didn't find her company entirely unbearable. It was around then he started to realize where they were, and his eyes widened dramatically. He could just feel color disappear from his face. A friggin' shooting range? Was this seriously what Sasuke had been planning? A shooting practice? This was Jiraiya's idea. The Raven announced, her voice barely reaching him in his current condition. He thought it'd be a good idea to teach you self-protection. I tried to tell him this is a tragic mistake, but he never listens to me. He jumped backwards when a weapon was held out for him, along with earplugs. Extremely dark memories surfaced immediately, making him shiver. Had his pride allowed such, he would have sprinted off right there and then. Don't hesitate to use this, brat. If you want to hang around us, you better make yourself useful. He could still remember those cold eyes. Naruto. Sasuke's eyes were sharp and demanding, almost suspicious. Are you okay? Just like back then, his hand trembled pathetically while he took the weapon, his whole being so filled with reluctance that he started to feel sick. He licked his lips and forced his breathing to even out before allowing himself to speak. Yeah, he whispered. I'm fine, I don't like these things. What a lousy understatement. Based on Sasuke's expression, she wasn't buying his explanation, but apparently decided not to press further. When he appeared unable to move, she dragged him to one of the booths, then stood close to him, very close. He shuddered a bit when he could actually feel the raven's warmth against him. Based on how stiff she wasn't sure about this, either. The woman's hands started to lead his. You're gonna have to remove the safety mechanism before you can shoot. To his stun, his fingers remembered exactly what to do. Although his hands still trembled, he worked fast, and in a matter of seconds a clicking sound announced that the weapon was fully prepared. Sasuke's eyebrow was arched when she glanced at him. You know. For someone who's never done this before, you're not half as bad as I expected. He snorted, shuddering and feeling unnaturally hot with the raven this close to him. Little by little he started to forget his former terror. Is that supposed to be a compliment? The raven commented while he lifted the weapon. The exact same second Sasuke's fingertips brushed his hand to help him, he squeezed the trigger with a loud gasp, his eyes widening. The bang that came sounded uncomfortably loud even with the earplugs he was wearing. His heart thumped, because of their close proximity or what he'd just done, he couldn't tell. Holy hell, was all he managed to produce. Sasuke seemed mildly annoyed when their gazes met. You should have told me you've handled weapons before. He scoffed, finding himself trembling. You think I enjoy this? Though in all honesty, he wasn't entirely sure if he did, in some twisted, masochistic level. The raven snorted, and took a moment before speaking. Are we going to keep on bickering, or do you want to try again? Had he been with anyone else than the Uchiha, he would have pleaded to get as far away from the building as possible. But at the moment, his blue eyes flashed. Just give me a damn bullet and I'll wipe that look from your face. This tiny, distant part of him couldn't stop wondering why he was so eager to prove himself to the raven. A couple of hours later in ANBU's base building, Kakashi felt somewhat amused and guilty when watching Hayate approach Yugo, who just returned from yet another mission. At first everything seemed to be going exactly as planned, the man's steps didn't even waver. But then, he arched an eyebrow at the stormy look on his friend's face when the man returned. What happened? Absolutely nothing, that's what. The brunette coughed sharply. She's seeing someone. The man glared at him, which seemed almost comical, then coughed again. I just made a fool of myself. He merely shrugged, feeling a twinge. That's only a hindrance, you know? She's not married or anything. Hayate blinked at him, then shook his head and coughed, seeming to be holding back a laugh. You're unbelievable. He almost grinned until an extremely dark sensation seeped through his whole being, making him feel cold. Something's wrong. That thought could barely be finished before sounds, definitely those of gunshots, could be heard from what felt like everywhere in the building. In a flash most of the people around them started to move, while others still exchanged alarmed glances. At that moment, Kakashi understood everything much too clearly. His eyes flashed while he balled his fists. Hayate. His voice was tight, slashed like a whip of some sort. Start out plan C, now. We're under attack. The man nodded, then, without wasting time on questions, started to rush away. He followed the brunette with his gaze for a while, then started to walk the other way as fast and silently as he possibly could. He prepared his weapon on the way, his head whirring with dozens of thoughts. Soon, however, everything there'd been on his mind simply flew away when he came to the biggest lobby of the building. A lesser man might have vomited when facing the sight he did. Right there before him lay the bodies of 9 agents. Blood and pieces he didn't even want to identify seemed to be everywhere, and looks that could only be called those of horror were imprinted to most of the dead ones' faces. He inhaled sharply through his mouth, not wanting to meet the stench that undoubtedly lingered. This is a slaughterhouse? Just then he shivered despite himself when hearing steps, along with the sound of steel. Don't turn around, Kakashi. For just a fragment his eyes widened as a chilling recognition sunk in. What the hell are you doing here? In the meantime Hayate rushed through the hallways of slightly lower levels of the building, his eyes scanning around, sharpened to their very extreme. Unfortunately, however, no amount of observational skills could have spared him from what was to come. He didn't gasp or make any sounds whatsoever, but stiffened completely and froze when seeing a very young woman with a strange haircut and eyeglasses. She arched an eyebrow once spotting him. Ah, so one little piggy actually dared to show up. She lifted a knife. That's too bad for you, really. He swallowed, evaluating his options. He could always fight, of course, but it wouldn't be of much use. If she really wanted him dead, she'd be able to finish him off in a heartbeat. Fortunately, the decision wasn't completely in his hands. Sharp gunshots echoed through the hallway, causing the woman that had been threatening him to retreat. Sorry, but it looks like I've got to get going now. See you later. He wasn't sure if some bullets even hit the woman while she sprinted to a nearby window that had been left open for some reason, and jumped. Looking towards the end of the hallway, he blinked twice when seeing Yugo. It took a moment before his voice worked. Thanks. She merely waved a hand, then dashed to the window the exact same moment he did. There wasn't a trace of the mysterious attacker down below. He frowned. This is bad. Yugo nodded solemnly with agreement. They stood in utter silence for a long moment until the woman moved. We should get going. She spoke silently, tensely, apparently suspecting that there were ears listening. I'm pretty sure this isn't over. In the basement floor of the building, Sakura and Sai were once again trying to go through their workload without ending up wanting to harm each other. Lately their cooperation had become easier, though. It had been bound to, after all, they'd been working together for 2 months already. Of course they still fought, quite hard at times, but there were also moments of peace during which they could easily imagine doing even more projects together. Today, they didn't get such experiences. Though for once Sakura didn't blame it on Sai. She'd had the absolutely worst night and morning with her daughter Katara being sick with a stomach bug of some sort. Only her sense of duty had kept her from staying home. And now, to enthrone the fun, she was having a splitting headache. Sakura. Sai's voice snatched her from self-pity-filled thoughts. The man surprised her with seeming mildly concerned. Are you alright? Because you've been staring at that page for 10 minutes. She blinked, the dryness of her eyes proving that he'd been right, then sighed. Will be. Or so I hope. She pushed herself up from her chair. I'll go and get something to drink so I can take an aspirin, okay? Apparently fate decided not to leave her alone just yet. She'd just picked up her wallet when it fell, most of its contents spreading everywhere. She spat out a list of cusses. In her current state she didn't manage to stop Sai before it was much too late. There was something unreadable in the man's eyes when he picked up a picture of a girl with long, pink hair and black eyes. It was Katara, at the age of 2. He stared at the picture for a mighty while before managing to react. Is she yours? She nodded, finding herself smiling slightly. Yeah. She took the picture away from him, not quite comfortable with him knowing this side of her just yet, and definitely not wanting to answer any questions about the girl's father. She mused for a couple of seconds. Do you have any family? The change she saw upon his face almost startled her. Sai? Had she gone too far, been too nosy? Sai looked away sharply, his expression turning chillingly blank. I'd rather not talk about it. For some reason she would have wanted to ask more, but became interrupted when realizing that something was badly wrong. The building was completely quiet. Too quiet. They looked at each other, eyes flashing. What the hell's going on? Sakura all but hissed, her throat tight and voice shivering with anxiety. Her heart was thumping furiously. Sai shook his head while preparing a weapon, eyes even darker than usually. I suppose we'll have to go and find out. Evening had already darkened that day when Sasuke stood on the balcony of Naruto's apartment, her vacant, narrowed eyes darted towards the city spreading below her. 7 months, huh? One of her hands brushed her flat stomach while the other squeezed the balcony's railing so hard that her knuckles turned white. To her, it felt closer to 7 decades. So here you are. Naruto's voice startled her a little, although she would have never admitted it. Peering over her shoulder she found the man approaching. Some bodyguard you are, disappearing like this. She couldn't resist a snort. And you actually care? The blonde scoffed. Don't think too highly of yourself. I just got sick of listening to Kiba snoring. He mused for a while before going on. You okay? You seem a bit pale. I mean, paler than usual. Her eyebrow was sent twitching, but for some reason she just couldn't find the energy producing an insult would have required. They lapsed into a surprisingly comfortable silence. Naruto wrinkled his nose when watching her pull out a cigarette and start to smoke. Are you trying to get yourself killed or something? She gave him a glare, although it came out rather mildly. Since when has the condition of my lungs been any of your business? She didn't realize that she actually put away the cigarette. The man shrugged. Since you became the one who's supposed to keep me alive. She blinked once when the blonde handed a steaming mug towards her all of a sudden. The man seemed to smother a chuckle when seeing her suspicious expression. It's tea, not poison, so you can stop looking at me like that. I figured you might be feeling cold out here. Gosh, how hard it was to hold back a smile. She took the offering, never noticing how her fingers brushed Naruto's as she did, and looked away while taking the first sip. She was surprised to discover that the drink was in fact very good, thanks. Thought I owe you that much. I mean, Naruto scratched his head, seeming sheepish. For you having saved my life, and stuff. Something that felt almost like an aura of peace lingered around them from there while they admired the city sparkling below them, neither feeling cold anymore. Had they been paying more attention, they might have noticed that they were standing much closer to each other than would have been necessary, all but holding hands. The silence lasted for so long that she shuddered slightly when Naruto spoke. I've always loved this view, the blonde announced, his eyes still resting on the landscape below them. She was much too aware of the fact that his hand touched hers, though it was most likely accidental. It's easy to just forget about everything here. She glanced towards him briefly, feeling some envy. I wish I'd be as lucky. She didn't realize she'd murmured it out loud until feeling the man's eyes on her. Her eyes narrowed. Damn it, what do you want to forget, Sasuke? Neither noticed that the man actually called her by her name. She shook her head, eyes narrowing even further. Naruto wasn't her therapist, only a client. She wasn't about to flood all this crap on him. Did he just sense a pout? You don't trust me at all, do you? She growled. You're my client. Try again when you've got a doctor's degree. Looking at the street below, she gave a small sigh when seeing a very familiar figure stood there, clearly waiting. I've gotta go for a minute. Don't you dare disappear in the meantime, understood? She gave her now empty mug back to the somewhat confused blonde. Thanks for the tea. With that she walked off. In less than a minute she'd made it to the house's staircase. Sure enough, Suigetsu was there waiting for her. He grinned when seeing her. So there you are. About time to show up. I was getting bored. She folded her arms with suspicion she couldn't explain. What are you doing here? You know well you're breaking all security protocols. And how the heck did you find the address of this place? Suigetsu shrugged. Yeah, I do. The man tilted his head a little with an arched eyebrow. Since when have you cared about the rules, anyway? She fought the urge to smack him. You never answered my question. Eager arms wrapped around her waistline, making her shiver ever so slightly. Would you believe that I missed you? She snorted as though having heard the best joke in a long time. No. Teme, where did you? They both looked on as Naruto peered out of his apartment. Something that a sudden might have called jealousy flashed by the blonde's face when he saw them. Oh. Sorry, she growled faintly. I'll be there in a second, okay? As soon as the blonde had disappeared she looked back at Suigetsu, stepping out of the man's hold. Now, I've got a job to do. So let's spare the fun for some other time. With that she turned around. She was about to leave until the man's voice stopped her. Sasuke? How much do you know about Naruto, anyway? She frowned, not turning around. He's my client, and a pain in the ass. One of her eyebrows arched a little while some very dark ideas started to rise. Is there something I should know? She had a pretty good idea that she knew the answer already. There was a moment's silence. Just be careful, will you? Distancing steps could be heard. It's hard to know who you can trust these days. It wasn't until the steps had disappeared completely did she dare to remove her hand from a fully prepared weapon. There was a deep frown on her face. What the hell was going on? Orochimaru's base building was just as dark and eerie as usual when Tenten sneaked through the hallways. It wasn't long before she distinguished Orochimaru and Kabuto's much too familiar voices. So our contact managed to get the information? Orochimaru stated, sounding so pleased that it chilled her. That's right. We have the address, Kabuto confirmed. It's only a matter of time before we'll be able to make our move. Very good. The older man apparently thought for a while. What about our little problem? Won't be a problem much longer. Kin is already on the move, and I'm fairly certain our subjects can be sent to perform a little field test as well. Ten shuddered, coming to a conclusion that she didn't need to hear anything more. Swallowing thickly, she placed one hand to her ear. Danzo, can you hear me? There was no response, and she scowled. Danzo, answer me, damn it. This is an emergency. There wasn't even the slightest sound. She produced a wide list of mental cusses while moving her hand away. So it's all up to me, huh? Inside the room, Kabuto was just leaving when his eyes met one of the screens that showed images security cameras were sending. A flash could be seen in black orbs while he observed Ten removing a hand from her ear with an irritated expression. Is something wrong? Orochimaru, who was stood before the room's window, inquired. I'll tell you when I know. With that he started to walk away. Good night, Orochimaru-sama. As he'd expected, there was no response. He left the room. While he walked through a hallway he pretended not seeing Ten, who'd hidden herself quite well behind one turn. It seemed there'd be interesting times ahead. On a slightly darker side of Konoha, a huge, skyscraper-sized building was almost completely dark while a tiny bird that had in some unfortunate way ended up in there zoomed through the hallways with screeches of terror. In the end the animal found its way into a massive room that had the slightest bit of light on. It sat to a metallic bar nearby the room's roof, as though watching and waiting. Soon a heavily pierced man with extremely chilling eyes, Pain, as his subordinates knew him, although it definitely wasn't his real name, walked into the room. Good. It looks like we're all here. Deidara leaned back in his chair, seeming impatient. I was just finishing a project, What's with the hassle? Hidan, who was leaning against a wall nearby, gave the blonde an infuriated look. He'd probably tell you if you'd give him a chance to speak. Surprisingly enough it was Karen who cut the fight before it got a chance to get any more annoying. She slammed a huge, thick file to a table placed precisely in the middle of the room. Namikaze Naruto, said a sticker glued on cardboard. I got this. She grinned icily, revealing sharp teeth. With causing a little bit of distraction, it was surprisingly easy to sneak into the mighty ANBU's base. Deidara frowned with disapproval. So you had fun without me, I feel insulted. Karen rolled her eyes. Stop being a brat. It was a three-man project, you would have been in the way. The blonde shrugged, still seeming irritated. Whatever, He then looked towards their leader, eyes gleaming. So, what does this mean? Are we ready to move? Pain shook his head. No. If we want to get to this Naruto before Orochimaru does, we'll need to come up with moves he wouldn't be able to execute. Karen clicked. We need an element of surprise, then. The man nodded as a confirmation. That's right. And we also need someone who can control Sasuke, knows her moves, a new voice spoke. A figure stepped out of the shadows, dark eyes filled with something unreadable. I don't think anyone knows my sister better than I do. Deidara grinned. You Uchihas really are full of surprises, The blonde then folded his arms with anticipation. So, when are we going to start rocking? Pain's eyes flashed in the light of an explosion on the other side of the city. Exactly where ANBU's base was. Now. The emergency room of the hospital started to buzz frantically with life when a blood-caked patient was brought in. Tsunade, the most experienced doctor at hand who'd thought she'd seen everything imaginable, shuddered when seeing the exact severity of the damage. She had to use all her professionalism to be able to gather herself. What do we have? A male patient at the age of 18, one of the medics announced in a slightly shuddering voice. Multiple wounds in chest and stomach area. Wounds on both sides of his mouth, several possible fractures, suspected internal bleeding and contusion in brain. There's also a gunshot wound on his side. We've already called the police. She nodded, refocusing on the patient. She didn't bother asking how much blood had been lost, she could tell it was too much. What's his name? His documents say Naruto Namikaze. She nodded, checking out the boy's pupils. She groaned a little when noticing that they were almost stiff, barely reacted to light. Naruto, can you hear me? As she'd expected, there was no reaction. Putting away the tiny flashlight she'd been using, she looked around to notice that no one else was moving. Every so-called professional was staring at the poor blonde-haired boy. She snarled out loud, "Damn it, people, move it. We can't waste a second here." It took hours of work, but eventually the blonde's state was almost stable. No one, however, dared to speculate whether he'd live or not. With silent prayers from the staff, he was taken into a room in the ICU. He slept 2 more weeks after being taken into that room. About 5 years later, Dr. Yamato Arasho 1. Looked up from the papers he'd been going through when a nurse called Rin emerged from that very same room. He felt a small slash when seeing the look on her face. "Has there been change?" To his stun, the woman nodded with an almost grave expression. "She just woke up." There was a sigh. "She keeps asking about the..." She trailed off. He nodded, feeling exactly the way she looked. "I think it's the best if I tell her. Thanks for the information." As he went, it took his all not to sigh. Damn it, how he hated delivering news like this. Once entering the room, he was mildly surprised to notice how well his patient, Sasuke Uchiha, looked, especially considering the state she'd been in. A lot of severe wounds still remained and she was unnaturally pale, but now that she was awake she didn't seem as fragile anymore. Unfortunately, however, he had a feeling the strength was only skin deep. He cleared his throat. "Morning. I'm Dr. Yamato Arasho." We were already getting worried. Meeting those demanding eyes, which as he knew were only asking one thing, he decided to just cut the chase. A deep sigh erupted through his lips while he sat to a chair placed beside her bed. "Sasuke, I'm so sorry." He figured it wasn't necessary to say more. Unlike most of his patients, when hearing such news, the raven didn't cry, didn't scream. Instead, she merely nodded, then turned her gaze, which turned blank in an instant, away, bringing a hand that didn't tremble to her stomach. Yes, she didn't make a sound. But for just a flash he saw the look in her eyes, and at that moment he understood. He'd never seen a patient as broken. Chapter 5. Boom. "Hey, Sasuke, wake up." She bolted into a sitting position. Her fist moved in a reflex, and barely managed to stop a millimeter from Naruto's face. She hissed, allowing the fist to fall, although a part of her would have wanted to use it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The blonde frowned a little. "You were having nightmares. Are you okay?" She looked away sharply, feeling disgusted with herself. "Yes. It came automatically. There's nothing to worry about." Naruto's eyes were sharp, carried no signs of surrender. "Sasuke, you were crying. So whatever it was, it must have been pretty bad." She kept looking away, her stinging eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't worry about it. It's none of your business, anyway." She expected Naruto to scold, to leave. That's why she shuddered when feeling a hand grab hers instead. She looked aside with a frown, but the blonde refused to meet her gaze. She was confused, although she would have never admitted it. She wished she would have had the will to pull her hand away, to snarl an insult, but it felt like all strength had left her. So instead she closed her eyes, for just a moment sinking into a world inside her head. "Are you thinking about names already? Call me a fool, but it felt like a nice idea. How does Kikyo sound?" She must have been drifting in her thoughts longer than she'd ever thought, because Naruto's voice managed to sneak up on her. "Hey, don't tell me you're falling asleep on me." It wasn't until then she realized that she'd rested her head against the man's shoulder. Hard as she tried, she couldn't find the strength to move away. Her eyes slipped closed despite all her struggle. HMPH. What she didn't know was that Naruto moved to take a better hold of her. Already as everything turned into a hue, a part of her suspected that she'd regret this dearly once she'd be more coherent. Kakashi's head hurt when consciousness started to rush in, so badly that it felt like someone had been drilling right through his skull. He groaned uncomfortably loudly, bringing a hand to his eyes although they weren't even open. "Fucking, damn it." There was a small snort, in which he was almost sure he could hear relief. "Well, don't you have a nice vocabulary when you wake up?" Very slowly, with far more effort than it should have required, he forced his eyelids to inch. He blinked somewhat sluggishly when meeting a cloud of pink, but eventually his eyes settled to a picture of Sakura's face. He frowned, gradually taking in how tattered the younger woman looked with a lot of dust, cuts, scrapes and bruises on her. "What?" His voice was more of a gasp than anything else. Sakura's face remained so solemn he felt chills. There was an explosion after that attack. Apparently we're not as well protected as we thought. His eyes widened ever so slightly and he emitted a tiny wheeze, feeling very cold. Crap, was all he managed to produce. The woman gave a tiny, dark laughter. That's right. Her green eyes then grew hard again. Do you think you can stand? He nodded, bravely pushing himself into a sitting position although the world around him seemed to sway uncomfortably. Yeah. With a little bit help from the pinkette he found himself standing, and gasped, this is bad. The building around them, it seemed a huge part of it had been completely destroyed, reduced into pathetic ruins. Blood could be seen in far too many places to his liking, and the staff that could still move was busily going through the ruins, which suggested that even more damage might be revealed soon. He swallowed somewhat thickly, his throat feeling impossibly dry. How many did we lose? His voice was slightly weaker than usually, but at least it worked. Sakura looked down, bangs covering her eyes. 15. And the cleaning up isn't over yet. He fought the urge to gasp. That was over 1/3 of the entire staff. Hayate and Yugo are going through the lower floors, Sai's somewhere nearby. Her eyes carried something dark. Danzo's nowhere to be found. He nodded, feeling the dark ideas he'd been having for a while grow stronger still. He then frowned again. What did they want, anyway? To immobilize us, I think, perhaps to find something. Or to slow us down so we wouldn't have time to notice something. She seemed to shudder. One of them was spotted nearby the silo. We can only guess what they wanted from there. He nodded with constantly darkening eyes, not liking those words the slightest. Just then Sai walked up to them, a gloomy expression on his dust and cut-covered face. I don't know what those guys did while attacking, but none of our protection systems works. Someone's hacked into our system. Kakashi could feel himself blanch. Hacked? Into their system? But why? The address is Naruto's safe house. He shivered. Sakura, call Sasuke, right now and get there as fast as possible. She's going to need backup. The pinkette nodded gravely, and with that the two younger adults started to sprint away. He sighed and looked around the destruction, his eyes flashing. He could only wonder just how messy things would get. In all, utter honesty, Sasuke had never meant to fall asleep like that. It was the kind of unprofessional behavior she'd always detested. That's why she groaned rather loudly when waking up to feel still sleeping Naruto's warm arms wrapped around her. Shit, sensing her movements the blonde stirred, then blinked sleepily. What? Her eyes flashed while she distanced herself from the man, inwardly listing cusses. Something that's never going to happen again. Naruto seemed amused as well as confused. What's so bad about falling asleep? The man looked at her for a little bit. So, are you okay now? She rubbed her face with both hands, stubbornly trying to get over the fact that a part of her had been far from repulsed by the fact that she just slept in the blonde's arms. Fortunately, the rather uncomfortable moment was cut by her cell phone's much too loud ringtone. She replied in a flash once recognizing Sakura's number. What is it? Sasuke, listen to me carefully. Sakura sounded so anxious that she almost felt chills. There's been an attack. They know where Naruto lives now. We're on our way there, but you should. Just then the phone call was cut short. Once more she groaned. Oh crap. Naruto didn't have the slightest clue what was happening when Sasuke hung up with an expression that gave him chills. What was that about? Sasuke didn't look at him. Kiba's out on a date, right? He nodded, feeling heavy shudders of dread. Yeah. Why? The woman nodded as well. Good. That means he's safe. His heart jumped several extra times when the Raven handed him a weapon all of a sudden. Don't hesitate to use this, alright? He frowned, and against all reason put the gun away as though it had burned his fingers. He was not planning on touching it again. What the hell is going on? Before Sasuke could ever respond there was a sound of breaking glass. Obsidian eyes flashed while the woman all but jumped out of the bed, fully prepared. Hide yourself, right now. Despite the fact that panic made his heart beat way too fast, he frowned, wanting to argue, but never got the chance to because Sasuke left the room. Yes, of course he understood that it would have been reasonable to leave, to find himself a safe place until whatever was going on would be over. But he'd never been a reasonable person, and for some reason the thought of leaving Sasuke alone felt unbearable to him. Carefully making sure he wouldn't be spotted, he followed the Raven's trails. The first thing he noticed when ending up nearby the living room was that the balcony's glass door had been broken. Then he spotted a woman at about his age with glasses and a strange haircut stood directly in front of Sasuke. The stranger's eyes flashed. Let's cut all the crap, okay? First hits flew. I know that witness is here. Just give him to me, and we don't have to go through all this. Sasuke's right hook caught the attacker by surprise, almost managed to split the woman's lip. I've never been sensible enough to do things the easy way. The woman snarled, eyes narrowing, and wiped away the blood. Well, how about this? The bitch can bite back. Sasuke emitted an odd sound. Do you want to see how hard? Apparently the answer was, yes, because before Naruto could even gasp the fight continued. Fists flew so fast that it was hard to tell to which woman they belonged, and sounds that made him feel sick to his stomach could be heard when kicks were exchanged. His heart hammered to a breaking point while he watched Sasuke endure several hits, although he couldn't understand why. Damn it, he was almost rushing over to the Raven's aid when the fight gained a sudden ending. With a kick that seemed harsher than any hammer, Sasuke threw the attacker a respectable distance away, and a groan could be heard when the woman hit the floor, hard. In a flash the Uchiha was kneeling by the woman so that one of the Raven's knees was all but pressed against the enemy's throat along with a sharp knife. Onyx's eyes were so hazardous when looking into the other woman's that even Naruto felt chills. Are you going to tell me who hired you, or do I have to dig the information out of you? The woman snorted. Do you honestly think I'm stupid enough to give you anything that easily? So worked up by watching the scenario Naruto was, that he didn't hear the steps approaching until it was much too late. He gasped faintly when a hard hand was clasped to his mouth, and cold steel was rested against his neck. Shut up or this blade slips, got it? A male voice snarled into his ear. The man then started to drag him towards where Sasuke and the other woman were. Karen, what the hell are you doing? Let's go. Sasuke, of course, reacted fast, but not fast enough. Just as she turned her gaze, the man holding Naruto kicked her head, so hard that a nauseating sound could be heard. The Raven fell down and lay unmoving. Naruto didn't understand where the terror that filled his chest came from. Sasuke. There was no reaction. Hard as he kicked and fought, the arms entrapping him didn't disappear. Wake up, damn it. Please, relax, the man behind him ordered. After a kick like that she'll stay down for a while. He tried to hurt the man restraining him, but didn't succeed. You asshole. How could you just? The blade on his throat pressed tighter, forcing him into a fuming silence. The other woman, Karen, as she'd been introduced, got up, dusting her clothes and wiping away blood. Thanks, Zaku. Though I could have handled that on my own. She cast a scornful look towards Sasuke. Damn, what an annoying bitch. There was a sound of annoyance. Could we please get going now? Karen rolled her eyes, and with that he found himself being dragged away, from his house, from safety, from Sasuke, without him being able to do a thing to stop it. He winced when glancing towards Sasuke for a final time, his eyes feeling oddly hot. I'm so sorry. About 2 minutes later they were stood outside in a surprisingly cold air. Naruto struggled his hardest to come up with a way to fight back when Zaku moved so that he could finally see the man, brown hair billowing in a wind that had appeared out of nowhere. The man seemed annoyed. So, we've got the witness. Did you find the disc? Karen shook her head. Nope. But I'm sure that little nuisance will talk about it happily after the handling my boss has in store for him. Her eyes then changed, became threatening. Now, if you value your life, I suggest you to just leave the blonde to me and walk away during the next 5 seconds, before my associate arrives to complicate things for you. Associate? The man frowned, seeming very suspicious, nearly cautious. All of a sudden. Who are you working for, anyway? Karen shrugged. Whoever pays me best. All of a sudden there was a sharp, star-shaped blade in her hand. In a blink it had flown to the man's throat. Right now it's not Orochimaru. Naruto felt his heart hammering and nausea appearing while he watched the man fall, then saw all the blood that appeared. That woman is insane. Just then approaching steps appeared, along with a voice that sounded chillingly familiar to him. That was effective. Karen made a HN. I hate doing it the messy way round. She then looked towards him. Now. I think we've wasted enough time already. He, however, found it almost impossible to focus on her, because as soon as he turned his head towards the newest arrival pretty much all his widened eyes could see was the man stood nearby. No matter how hard he wished otherwise the image remained. The same gray hair, the same dark eyes, the same expression. He found himself trembling pitiably while old, extremely nasty memories flowed into his head. Hidan? How the hell is this possible? Hidan grinned in a way he remembered much too well. Long time no see, you little twit. The man measured him up with his gaze. You grown up. At this point Karen started to leave. I'm leaving you two to catch up. I'm expecting to get my payment in 2 days. Left alone with the man, Naruto would have wanted to step backwards, run to Sasuke, but found himself completely paralyzed. Hidan seemed to enjoy the situation. The man started to approach him. It was kind of insulting how you ran away back then. Stunning even himself, he pulled out the weapon Sasuke had given him, pointing it towards the man's chest with badly trembling hands. Stay the hell away from me. Hidan snorted, but stopped anyhow. Is that supposed to be threatening? The gray-haired folded his arms with a mocking expression. You weren't much of a killer back then. I doubt you'd be any better now. The man's hands moved, without a doubt looking for a weapon of some sort. Now let's have some fun. At that moment, the decision as to what he should do wasn't in his hands. There was a loud bang that seemed to echo everywhere, and with a gasp of startle he accidentally pulled the trigger. Before the sound of a gunshot ever disappeared, he saw not only 1 but 2 bullets hit the somewhat surprised-looking Hidan. One sinking dangerously close to the man's throat, and the other slamming precisely between the man's eyes. He was fairly sure he screamed while watching the gray-haired fall with a nauseating thud, blood appearing in a pool. The gun slipped from his quivering fingers while he stood completely frozen, feeling ready to vomit and roar until there'd be no air left but unable to do either. What the hell have I done? I wasn't. I told myself I'd never. Naruto. As though through a silencer of some sort, Sasuke's voice snatched his attention. Blinking dubiously, he lifted his gaze slowly to see the woman approaching with a frown, holding a gun that had obviously shot the second bullet. Are you alright? For a long moment he couldn't speak, could barely think. In the end, barely audible words left his throat. You're okay. Sasuke scoffed. In some other mental state he might have noticed the sound was much softer than it should have been. It takes a lot more than that to keep me down. He nodded numbly, barely managing to hear those words. All his attention was locked on Hidan. Sasuke wasn't sure if she felt worried or nauseated when Naruto threw up loudly. Perfect. Some alarm crossed her being when she noticed how pale the blonde was, how badly the man shivered and how glazed over those blue eyes were. Naruto. She didn't manage to make much contact and hissed, damn it. Sasuke. Turning her head, she found Sakura and a man she suspected to be Sai approaching. Worry could be seen on her best friend's face. Are you alright? She nodded, although her head hurt like hell from the kick it had received. They didn't manage to get their hands on the disc, or Naruto. Sakura relaxed visibly. Good, the woman all but breathed out. I'm sorry we're late, we got stuck. She didn't hear the rest, because an all-consuming sensation of being observed filled her. It felt like someone's eyes had been boring straight into her soul. Sasuke? She didn't look towards the direction of Sakura's voice. What's wrong? She shook her head, her eyebrows furrowing. The feeling didn't disappear. I don't know. With that she started to walk away, grabbing Naruto's hand on the way to make the blonde move. He's in a shock. And I feel like my skull's been fractured, so let's just get going, okay? Sakura nodded slowly once following her. The 4 of them walked on in silence for a while. Look, Sasuke. There's something pretty huge you should know, the pinkhead spoke eventually. None of them noticed a dark figure stood on the roof of a nearby block of flats. Itachi's eyes carried no emotion while he lowered his weapon, then turned around and walked away. The day past had felt endless when Hayate all but swayed out of the partially destroyed building to catch some fresh air. He was stunned to find Yugo there, smoking a cigarette deep in thought. He might have chickened out and run away, but 3 sharp coughs that appeared made the decision for him. He'd never felt as awkward as he did when the woman looked at him. Hey. Not knowing what else to do, he looked at her cigarette. I didn't know you smoke. She smiled a bit. It's a bad stress habit I'm trying to get rid of. She sighed heavily, looking away once more. Long day, huh? He could only nod while standing less than a meter away from her. Yeah. They remained in a surprisingly comfortable silence for a long time until Yugo spoke all of a sudden. You know. That guy the first was seeing. She waited for a while. I've done a lot of thinking today, and Well, I just told him it's over. He blinked, utterly confused. Why was she telling him this, unless? But then again, they'd done quite a bit of talking lately. Maybe she simply considered him a friend now. That's. He coughed. I'm sorry. To his surprise, the woman smiled a bit when shaking her head. HMMH. For a moment she seemed like she would have wanted to say something, but in the end started to leave. I'll see you later. For the longest time he stared at the direction to which she disappeared, until he coughed hard, coming to a realization that there was no point in going inside just yet. His steps started to lead him to a tiny walk. Had he been a little less worked up, he might have sensed threat before it was too late. He froze completely when hearing a much too familiar voice coming from an alleyway not too far away. Wasn't supposed to get into a danger. That wasn't a part of our deal. There was a snort, followed by a voice he didn't recognize. A deal? By now you should have already learned that it's a sliding term. There were harsh sounds. Screw me around once more, and I'll show you how hard I can be to work with. There was a moment of heated silence. I must confess, though. You were pretty effective today. I hope you got all the information I told you about. Quote, we did. You'll receive the settled payment soon. Very slowly yet inevitably Hayate's head started to catch on, leaving him almost breathless. So, there really was a traitor amongst them. Someone had betrayed ANBU, endangered everyone in the building, partially caused the deaths of 15 people. He was just about to rush away to share this new information when something sharp slammed to his neck, making him gasp. From the searing pain that followed he barely heard the approaching steps. Gotcha. Gritting his teeth he turned slowly to meet the traitor's face. Everything was already getting blurry, and he found it hard to stand. I should have known. There was a shrug he could just distinguish. Everyone makes misjudgments sometimes. The last thing he heard was a badly jumbled voice. No hard feelings, yeah? He slumped against something warm and soft. Sweet dreams. After having been waiting fruitlessly for what felt like a decade, Kiba decided that he wasn't about to make a fool of himself because of some woman. Just as he rose from his seat to leave the restaurant, however, he grinned when spotting a familiar woman entering. He couldn't help noticing her outfit, or that eyeglasses had been switched to contact lenses. Well, you sure took your time. Karen grinned slightly as well while taking a seat, and he was too oblivious to notice anything chilling in her expression. Sorry about the wait. I was busy with work. She grabbed a menu. So, what's good in here? Later that day Kakashi rubbed his forehead with 2 fingers, utterly exhausted. He felt more tired than ever in his life, but refused to get rest just yet. So tired he was, that he shuddered when his cell phone, the number of which only few people had, started to ring. He sighed a little with relief when noticing who it was. Are you two alright? Yes, with some cuts and bruises though, and I think Naruto's still in a bit of shock. But we'll live. Sasuke's voice sounded unusually tight. Sakura told me what happened. How much damage was done? He shook his head, ignoring the fact that the woman couldn't see it. It's hard to tell at this point. He grunted a little and rubbed his face, cursing the headache that escalated just then. You know what this means, right? Sasuke made a HN. Do you know who sold out the information? Just then his gaze spotted Danzo, who seemed to be deep in thought. He watched as the man walked by. I have a clue, but I still hope I'm wrong. There was a snarl. I have to go now. Call me if anything happens. Of course. He then frowned. What are you doing, anyway? Taking my work home. There was a sound he couldn't recognize. I'll call you later. With that she hung up. He stared at his phone for a while before shaking his head with a sigh. That woman is going to be the death of me. Was that Sasuke? Suigetsu's voice nearly startled him. Looking up, he found the younger man stood rather nearby with a strange, almost worried expression. Is she all right? He nodded. Yes, though not very happy. He then frowned. Where have you been? The man responded with showing him an impressively thick file. Remember how paranoid Sarutobi was about everything? The explosion revealed a tiny storage room he'd ordered to be built. It seems that before this only 2 people knew about that place. It was full of copies of important documents. The man handed the file to him, including this. His eyes immediately detected the name written on the file. Namikaze Naruto. He arched an eyebrow. Excellent job. Suigetsu grinned toothily. Thanks. The younger man then yawned and stretched. Can I go now? I've been up 40 hours straight already, and Ibiki and Genma are investigating the room. He nodded. Although ANBU was in chaos, there was no point in torturing excellent employees, of course. See you tomorrow. Suigetsu merely waved a hand as a response while going. As soon as the man was gone, he focused on the file, and the about a ton of papers inside it. After going through the papers for only a couple of minutes, he took his phone with darkened eyes, then dialed numbers. It seemed to take forever before there was a response. I'm sorry I'm calling this late, but this is urgent. He glanced gloomily towards the documents. There's something we didn't know. After hanging up, Sasuke turned her gaze towards still rather confused-looking Naruto, who was currently looking around her apartment. Bringing him to her apartment that was barely big enough for even her was the about last thing she would have wanted to do, but it was also the only option. Her address couldn't be found anywhere, not even from ANBU's database, and she couldn't trust any safe houses, anyway. The blonde would be safe there. If she wouldn't kill him, that is. Her heart shivered a little when she noticed that the blonde was looking at a picture of what her family had once been, 2 children and parents. You never told me you have a brother, the blonde remarked. Where is he? She snorted. So he's his own nosy self again. It took a mighty while before she managed to compose herself. I take that as you're feeling better already. She observed him for a moment, noticing that self-hatred hadn't left his eyes. Are you okay? Naruto tried to fake a grin, but didn't really succeed. Yeah. I mean, you were the one who got their head banged, not me. He started to make his way towards the small apartment's bathroom, steps uncharacteristically hesitant. I just need a long, hot shower, that's all. Then I'll call Kiba before he freaks out when finding the messed up apartment. She nodded, far from convinced by his response. HN. Just before disappearing into the bathroom, Naruto turned to look at her once more. This time she could tell that the tiny smile on his face was a genuine one. Oh, and thanks. The blonde gestured towards the apartment. For this, and everything. She growled. Just go, will you? The man rolled his eyes before disappearing, steps already a lot lighter. As soon as she heard the shower, she sighed heavily and rubbed her head, the headache left by the kick she'd gotten still lingering. As her eyes slipped closed, she knew one thing for sure. This mission was going to become very uncomfortable. That night, it was unusually cold in Orochimaru's base as 5 people gathered into the man's office. 10-10 felt repulsed when seeing how Orochimaru eyed Kimimaro and Jugo, who were stood quite nearby with terrifyingly blank expressions. You two are my most promising subjects at the moment. That's why I have a little mission for you, if you wish to accept it. What kind of a mission would it be? Jugo inquired. Orochimaru's eyes flashed when turning towards Kabuto. Would you? Kabuto nodded, stepping forth. You need to find a man named Naruto Uzumaki, the younger man announced. He's a very important witness, and he also stole something very important to us. Take care of his bodyguard and bring Naruto here, alive. Thank you. Now, Orochimaru's eyes were filled with a chilling gleam when turning towards the 2 men, subjects. Do you accept this little mission, as your field test? 10-10 felt her heart hammer just a little bit while she waited for the response. If Kimimaro would accept this mission, to go out for a hunt, they'd be official enemies. She'd have to let go of all the little hope she'd had. For the longest time the 2 younger men looked at Orochimaru, until Jugo nodded. Yes, I accept. She was fairly sure her heart broke when Kimimaro nodded as well, green eyes fixed firmly towards Orochimaru. I accept, too. At that moment she realized with sickening certainty that it was really over. It took her all to control emotions. 10-10. Orochimaru's voice echoed inside her jumbled head. She barely managed to meet his gaze. Take care of all the required arrangements. She nodded, feeling hollow, of course. With that she left the room, unable to look towards Kimimaro.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.